Hello, I'm Mr. McBrien. This is TEJ20, Protecting Your Files. Ontario would like for students to be able to use file management techniques to organize and back up files efficiently. And that's the 2 hours traffic of our stage today. Why are backups important? You can think about that for yourself if you want to pause the video. Go ahead and come up with some reasons why backups can be important. Well, stuff happens. It's common to have floods. It's common to have, in some areas of the world, tornadoes. Fires still occur. We talked a few times about hard drives have an expected lifetime of about 5 years. Malware remains a concern. And other things can go ahead and cause you to lose files from their primary location. And so this leads us to the idea of we have to expect that problems will occur. And worse, failures don't happen when we want them to. So we don't want to have to be dealing with difficult situations during other stressing times in our lives. We have to recognize that some files can be replaced and some can't. And we need to realize that planning ahead, we can set up automated backups in just a few minutes and potentially save ourselves massive headaches looking forward. So what are our options for backups? Again, I'd invite you to pause the video right now and think about how can you back up files? All right, hopefully you came up with a list. Here is the list I created off the top of my head. We can have a second internal hard drive in our computer. We can use an NAS like the one shown on the right. We could burn DVDs. We could burn our files to our flash drive or an external hard drive. Or, of course, the famous cloud-based approaches. What I can say is, if possible, backups should not be in the same geographic location as the original files. When it comes to choosing a backup system, there is no single perfect system. Each one has advantages and disadvantages. We need to weigh a bunch of different factors against each other. So one of the key things we need to consider is how risky is our current situation? What's our risk of loss of the files? And what can we do if we do lose them? In other words, is the loss of those files a big deal, a little bit of a headache, or just inconvenient? Then we need to evaluate the cost of a given backup system, how secure our data will be once we back it up, and how convenient that backup system will be. And if you notice, a system that might be very inexpensive might be very inconvenient. These things tend to trade off against each other. Now, in choosing the right backup system for you, you may want to sit and consider different scenarios and how likely they are to occur and how much of a hassle those will be in evaluating whether to spend a few bucks on backups or hundreds of dollars per year on backups. Now, we also should be able to talk about the differences between systems in terms of some very logistical portions. So we can do a complete backup of every file on our computer. And this obviously takes a lot of time and uses up a lot of space. We can weigh that against the idea of incremental and differential backups that supplement a complete backup. So as soon as we have one backup of our data, those systems will add to that backup at given times. We can evaluate a manual backup versus an automated backup, and I think you can infer what I'm going to advocate. Let's define differential and incremental backups. So a differential backup backs up the data that's changed since the last full backup. So the advantage to this, it's very easy to manage. Essentially, all the system does is keep track of what was done in the last backup, last full backup, and back up everything else. The disadvantage to this approach is that each time you do the backup, there can be a lot to do. An incremental backup is like a smart differential backup. So essentially what it does is it checks to see what was done in the last incremental backup and adds to and simply backs up what's changed since the last incremental backup. So the advantage to this approach is each time it does it, there will only be a few files. You could do this kind of thing hourly if you wanted to. And it is the most efficient in terms of space as well. The disadvantage is it's harder to manage because you have to keep track of all of that stuff. The good news is there's software to do that for you. Now, cloud-based backups have a massive advantage, of course, because they're off-site. Any on-site storage system has risks because the thing that happens to one of your storage types could happen to the other as well. Cloud-based backups move your data off-site, which has a tremendous benefit. They're reasonably inexpensive for small amounts of data, and they're fairly secure, so there haven't been significant breaches to date. And by using that incremental differential backup approach, we don't have to use up a whole lot of bandwidth after our first backup, complete backup of all of our files. Essentially, we only back up what we've changed since the last backup happened. And there are lots of examples of these cloud-based backup systems. Many of them have free utilities and a small amount of free space that you can take advantage of. So we tend to use iDrive in our class to essentially establish how a cloud-based backup works. iDrive also can be configured to use the same utilities, not to back up through the web, but to back up to a separate disk in your computer. Now, you might say, wait a sec, didn't Mr. McBrien tell me I needed to create a Windows system image way back when? Well, the system image is not a backup of data. So the system image is a backup of your operating system, the drivers, everything you need to run the computer. And those images are too large to back up on a regular basis, and they don't change that often. So your system image should be considered to be complementary to your data backup. So data should be backed up on a very regular basis, weekly or daily, whereas your system image may only need to be backed up, for example, every 6 months. Now, manual versus automated data backups. Let's ask ourselves a question. Is a DVD burn a good strategy for backups? And a typical Mr. McBrien follow-up question, part B, why not? Well, for most people, a DVD burn is not a good strategy. And the reason for this is that DVD burns can't really be automated. And people are lazy. If you're going to design a product, if you're going to design a system, there are worse things for you to consider as a key parameter when you're designing these things. The laziness of people is legendary. So any strategy for backup that involves a human being doing what they're supposed to at a specific time of day or a specific day of the week, you run the risk of non-compliance. So, I can't emphasize this enough. A good backup strategy is an automated backup strategy. So, automated approaches include the cloud, network attached storage, a flash drive that you permanently attach to your computer, or an additional hard drive that you permanently attach to your computer. Now, there is no single perfect backup strategy. It is useful to consider given scenarios when you are deciding what backup strategy to use. So let's try that exercise, shall we? Let's imagine we've got a home office in your basement. You want to do backups of your family photos for the last 100 years. This is where your family photos are stored for the entire extended family. So you decide on using a second hard drive. You install it into your computer and you set up Windows to incrementally back up your files every Sunday at midnight. Okay. Is this a good approach? Why or why not? So pause the movie and think about this. Come up with the positives and the negatives to this approach. Okay, I'll give you my answer to this. Now, first off, it satisfies the key criterion of being automated, which is good. It protects us from certain situations. We're protected against hard drive failure, which we know can occur. And we're protected from the inherent laziness of human beings. We know the backup's going to occur because we've scheduled Windows to do it every Sunday or what have you. But there's some downsides here. Because the hard drive is located inside the same computer, if we have a flood, a fire, or an electrical storm, chances are both hard drives get destroyed. In addition, you may have heard this term ransomware before. If someone manages to hack into our computer and encrypt our data, they can get access to both. Because they'll get access to the computer, they get access to both hard drives at the same time. So, there are some significant downsides to this backup system. It's cheap, it's automated, but it neglects certain key disaster situations. And so we might not want this to be our sole system for backing up those photos. Or that 92-year-old photo of Aunt Bessie might just get lost. So here's another scenario. You decide to back up your schoolwork files on DVD because you have a DVD burner in your computer and you know there's a stack of DVDs on your desk. So I'll leave this as an exercise for you to think about what's good and bad about that system. Okay, so there's our quick run through on backups and on fragmented hard drives. So, hard drive data is typically fragmented. A given large file can be in several locations at once, which reduces the efficiency of data retrieval. Most OSs have utilities to automatically move files around, put them in more efficient locations. All devices fail eventually. Hard drives are no exception. If we want to keep our data, we need to make backups. Your system image and your data backups work together. You need both to be able to restore your machine in the event of a zombie apocalypse. Remember that backups have to be scheduled and automated, or sooner or later, you stop bothering to do them. Okay, so for your homework then, please do an audit of your home system. What measures have been taken in your home to protect important files? Obviously, in order to answer that question, you have to first figure out which files are important and locate them. Create a brief report on how well that system did. Now, the assignment is not to fix it, it's just to document it. So it's to do a little audit, something that IT professionals do all the time. And also, assuming there is some kind of system for restoring those files, design an approach you would take to verifying that that system is working. And that's a bit of a thought exercise. All right, that's all for today. Thanks very much. Have a great night.